Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. And now we have a special section. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome to our stage Sir Martin Sorrell and Charlie Rose. Time magazine calls these two notable individuals the two most influential people in the world. Charlie Rose and Sir Martin will engage in a dialogue we know you will find illuminating. Thank you.
Well, thank you for that. You know, there's an
I think they were talking about you, Charlie, not me.
There is an old tradition in Hollywood where they talk about piano players and they come and they sing for their supper. Whenever I go to these events, I feel like I'm singing for my supper, except tonight I'm singing for friendship. There are two people here, Ron Perlman and Martin, whose friendship I cherish and value and salute the award that he is getting tonight. He has been a friend of mine, and I'm so pleased here to talk to him tonight with you. Hebrew University is an important part of what I have done in Israel, because when I go there, they have been so very grateful to me to allow me to use their campus for interviews. So what they are doing this evening with this award to Sir Martin has my whole approval. This is one more award for Sir Martin Sorrell. He's gotten almost all the kinds of awards you can get in business, and for his company. We'll talk about his biography tonight, but this is a guy educated at Cambridge who went to Harvard Business School, who then went on to work at Saatchi & Saatchi. He was there called the third brother. And at some point, I think around 1985 or so, he bought this company called, I think it was called Wire Plastics and Products.
Wire and Plastic Products.
Wire Plastic Products. WPP.
An industrial Goliath.
And, you know, think about this. It probably means as much to his original business as Berkshire Hathaway's business, the textile business, means to Warren Buffett today and to what Berkshire Hathaway does. But he has become the giant of advertising. WPP is the largest advertising and communications company in the world. And what he has done with that company through a series of acquisitions and through his own sense of comprehension of a changing world is a remarkable look into how communications and advertising are changing. I mean, it clearly is a business that the digital revolution has affected. Just think about Facebook. Facebook is doing so well today because they found a way to advertise on mobile devices. So I want to begin this by talking about you, and tell me how you see the challenge of your business today.
Okay. Well, first of all, I've got to say that I've done one program with you, Charlie, right? And if you remember, it was on the 20th anniversary. I only appeared on your show after 20 years, okay? And I congratulated, a hearty muzzle toff on your 20th birthday, and I said, my opening line was that, and my closing line was, I hope I get invited back before another 20 years. Now, I haven't been invited back yet, so I'm just...
well, Perlman is lobbying for you, so maybe.
Anyway, so how do I see... Well, we have some opportunities which, and like all opportunities, if you don't do something about them, they become challenges or threats. And I'm delighted we have a large number of colleagues here from WPP, from the group. And there are four things, really, that we're very focused on. The first, the fast growth markets, which sadly have become, as you know, slower growth markets, but still faster than many of the slow growth and mature markets. So they are 30% of our business. So if, talking a little bit controversially, if Iran was to happen in the sense that sanctions were lifted, and in my personal view, the Iranians were prepared to recognize the state of Israel at the same time, but that's a personal view, not a corporate view, 83 million people would become roughly the same size as Vietnam, a third bigger than Myanmar, would become available to our clients for goods and services. And my bet would be, for what it's worth, that is probably quite likely to happen, subject to dealing with the centrifuge issue. So one thing is that 30%, we want that to be 40 to 45%, big opportunity. Digital, you mentioned, it's 36% of our business. Roughly 23, 24%, I think the latest statistic is, of our clients' budgets are invested in digital. But if you look at America and you look at statistics like Mary Meeker's, something like 45% of time that you and I spend on media is spent on internet and mobile. So we're still underweight from a budget point of view, and WPP at 36% is still underweight. Third thing is data. We have Eric Salama here, who runs our data business and the DIM business. He says I shouldn't use the acronym DIM, but the DIM business is a business which is 25%, and therefore data is probably about right. And then last but not least, it's what we call horizontality, which is integrating what we do for our clients across our business. We have 178,000 people in 111 countries. Could have been 112 with Scotland. But
were you in favor of that?
I was not in favor. I actually, it's an interesting question. I think David Cameron, maybe I shouldn't say this, but I will, came very close to disaster on that. And it was only in the last week or so, as you well know, that the polls started to swing.
It was trending towards independence, and then they finally woke up, and they went and campaigned, and they turned it around at the last moment.
That's right. I mean, it was quite nasty in the end. On the other hand, you could look at the election that's coming up in the UK in May of 2015, and the Scottish National Party, which Alex Salmond led at that time, although he stepped down, may have a swing vote. I mean, they may win so heavily in Scotland, taking votes away from Labour, that they will have a lot of influence together with UKIP. And as we're talking to an Israeli crowd or a Jewish crowd, predominantly Jewish crowd, where immigration has been so important, just make the point that UKIP in the UK is anti-immigration, and that my grandparents would probably not have been able to go to the UK from Russia, Poland, or Romania at the turn of the last century if the point system that they want to introduce, or they have introduced actually in many respects, was in place. So it's those four things: fast growth markets, digital, data, and last but not least, getting people to play together.
But it would seem to me that the two things that are the most catalytic in your industry are global growth, which you suggested. Asia is a huge market. Latin America is a huge market. Central Europe is a huge market. The Middle East is a growing market. And at the same time, changes brought about technology.
Yeah, those are the two buckets. Yeah. The first bucket, I think, is reasonably, I mean, if you watch Charlie Rose's program every night, you probably figure out the geographical bit. Yeah. The technology bit is really difficult because Eric Schmidt, I remember a few weeks ago, was in Germany. Yeah. He was asked who's his biggest competition. He said Amazon. And then he checked himself and said, no, it's the garage. You know, it's the startup in the garage.
Some disruptive element.
Yeah. And then Nikesh Arora, before he disappeared to Sonsan, was at our Stream conference. We have Yossi Vardi here, who, along with my wife, originated at Kinneret, the unconference. And at that unconference, Nikesh in Cannes said, in answer to the question, what's your biggest competition? It is the garage startup, the disruptor.
What about Alibaba?
Well, it's interesting. So 2 years ago, Scott Spirit, who's our strategy guy, based in Singapore, he's then based in Shanghai, said to me, we should go and visit our Chinese clients. And we went and saw, in 2 weeks, I think it was about 30 of our local, China is our third largest business. $1.5 billion of revenue, America's $6 billion, UK's $3 billion, and we've got 16,000 people, I think, in 80 cities in one way or another in China. So we go to Hangzhou, and we meet Jack Ma. We'd seen Jack Ma before, and Jack explains, this is 2 years ago, explains that he's retiring from the Alibaba business, which is going to be floated. He introduces us to his new CEO, and I said, what are you going to do? And he said, well, I'm going to do the social stuff. I think water was one of the things he was interested in. I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to focus on two other things. I said, what are they? He said, logistics platform and financial transactions platform. So he was, and of course, they're excluded from the IPO. And I remember coming away from that thinking, you know, this is going to be big. And we came back, and we started to talk about, I'm saying I told you so, or we told you so, we said at that time, it'll be a $200 billion company. And I remember, one of the problems we have in the West is we don't really want the Chinese to succeed. There's sort of envy about them. And this is a problem that not just the Americans have, but we in Britain have, and I think Western Europe.
At a political level, that one of the fears of certain elements of the Chinese political establishment is that America does want to contain them.
Yeah, but there is this sort of envy, and there's this, they steal things, right? But we said that about the Hong Kong Chinese, we said that about the Japanese, we said that about the South Koreans, and look what happened. So Jack Ma was one. The other guy we saw at the same time in Shenzhen was Lei Jung, who founded Xiaomi, which in the latest round of financing, after 4 years now, I think it is now, is going to be valued, according to reports, at $50 billion, private company. And Xiaomi is a handset manufacturer, assembler, assembled, interestingly, by Foxconn and one or two others, who are the people who assemble Apple as well. So God knows what goes on, but put that to one side. Internet-delivered handphone, smartphone, and an Apple TV box equivalent, right, with Android technology, and it is, in its 4th year of operation, outselling Apple and Samsung in China. So Chinese technology, if you were going to ask me the question when I next appear on your program, was if you're going to ask me the question, what's next? Because that's the question. I would, we're in the throes.
To build up to that now.
The Chinese technology. I think that's.
So Baidu will be huge.
Well, Baidu is already huge. It's last time I checked, it was $60 billion a market cap. Tencent's 140 billion. Alibaba's 240 last at 244. And Amazon is less, and Facebook's less.
All right, so let me talk about this. People look to WPP as some way that you have a kind of litmus test in terms of what you're seeing. And this will be true, in fact, with Warren Buffett in terms of he's able to sort of look and see how the economy is going because he's got so many companies in so many different ways. So in terms of advertising and what your clients tell you, give me a kind of wraparound of the global economy today, starting with the United States, then Britain, then Europe, then Latin America, and finally Asia.
Okay, so U.S. is better and strengthening. A number of the business people that I've spoken to subsequent to the midterms and the results feel much more better about life and are very much more optimistic. We've got Robert here, and Robert's close associate, Rupert, is I think I can say this, is usually very gloomy. I mean, Rupert is always pessimistic. Yesterday at the Foursquare lunch, I asked him how he felt, and he was feeling pretty bullish, I think, actually.
You forget
frisky, says Robert.
Forget I interviewed him yesterday at the Foursquare.
Yeah, you separated him from Jeffrey Bucas, I understand. But he was very optimistic, and I would say that's symptomatic of what we hear. Now, whether that turns into some way of working for the last 2 years of the Obama administration, I really don't know. I mean, you're getting mixed signals, and we've got Joel here, President Obama's pollster, basically, and I don't know whether he knows, but certainly that's the big question. But the US generally is better. UK, very strong. Actually, probably the strongest region. We've increased our number of people, the population of WPP in the UK, by about 25% in the last 3 years. So remarkable, actually, that the economy is growing at about 3.5–4% nominal. Rest of Europe, Western Europe, France, Italy, Spain, pretty tough. Spain, the least tough, recovering. Italy, mixed Renzi. There was a bit of optimism, sort of Modi-like optimism around Renzi, but that seems to have evaporated a bit. France in deep doo-doo.
Germany?
Germany, I'm bullish on Germany, but it's obviously their biggest trading partner is Russia. It works both ways, and that prior to the Hong Kong demonstrations, in my view, was the biggest threat that business had to deal with. It's been surpassed in the last few months by Hong Kong because China is the driver of the world economy. Latin America, the Brazilian election, you know this better than I do, Dilma winning again was not what the business community wanted. They wanted Neves to win, and probably he was winning going with 7 days into before the election, and really probably from a campaign point of view, screwed it up. Whether she will change or not is another question. The rest of Latin America, Mexico, I'm very bullish on. Nieto with the energy reform, really strong. Colombia, very strong. Peru, strong. Argentina, Venezuela, very problematic. You shift to Asia. I'm a bull on China. I think Xi is very strong. But the Hong Kong test is a real test, and he has no alternative but to deal with it. And India, bullish. Modi has made a big difference.
Having said all that, you have said recently that I have never known a time of so many risks to the global economy.
Sarajevo's, yeah.
Yeah, Sarajevo's is what you said, and you pointed to ISIS, Ebola, Hong Kong.
Right. Yeah, and those are the black swans. I mean, we really didn't, they were the unknown unknowns. Things like the US deficit, the $18 trillion here, the Eurozone, the Middle Eastern in a general sense, we didn't know about ISIS. These were issues that were the gray swans, the known unknowns. I mean, I do think there's a lot. And the impact of all this, so like I'm involved with the Business Council here, the GDP forecasts by the Business Council are always more conservative than Goldman's forecasts or the World Bank's forecasts or the IMF at the beginning of the year. And as we go through the year, IMF and Goldman and everybody else bring it down. So if nominal GDP starts at 5 or 5.5%, they bring it down to where the Business Council is at, which is, let's say, 4. And the reason is that the people who make up the Business Council run businesses. And they are innately more conservative. They're sitting on $4.2 trillion of net cash, relatively unleveraged balance sheets, unwilling to take risk.
But why are they unwilling? Is it because of regulation, some suggest? Is it because they're worried about the global economy? Is it because they don't see the consumer demand and growth that they need? Well,
there are multiple things. So firstly, it was the catatonic impact of Lehman. I mean, Lehman, you read Ross Sorkin's book, Too Big to Fail, the world nearly came to an end, right? You know this better than anybody. And the financial world, it was America's financial Pearl Harbor. That's what Warren Buffett called it. GE was 24 hours away from being unable to refinance its liabilities. So it's that. It's the fact that the average life of a CEO is 5 years. The average life of a CFO here is 3 years. The average life of a chief marketing officer is 2 years. And then, by the way, the other thing is corporate governance. And I know you don't have our system of chairmen and CEOs, which introduces even more caution, I think, into the system.
We still do have some.
We do have some, but it's not the rule. It's the exception. Average life, a non-executive director at WPP earns about $100,000. A non-executive director at somewhere like GE probably gets $350,000, $400,000. The risk-reward ratio for failure in relation to reward is just completely out of kilter. So inherently, people on our board want to make sure that I don't make a mistake and we don't take on too much risk. And how do you explain, how do you explain these companies are sitting on $4.2 trillion of net cash, basically, right? Whatever the figure is. The latest Bloomberg figure I saw was over $4 trillion. I think you explain it that people are inherently. Now, what's very interesting, there was a piece today about low-income employment and the fact there were large numbers of people still in the US at high levels of unemployment, low income. This is not a skill shortage. The reason is companies are unwilling to take on labor. There is too much focus on cost. I came from CNBC just before, and Sandy Weil said to me, who was going to lead one of the discussions there, he said, it's amazing what US corporations have done to reduce cost to get to the bottom line. And the problem is growth is sub-trend, meaning below where it was pre-Lehman. The world was growing at 6 or 7, it's now growing at 4 or 5. Fast growth markets, as I've said, have slowed down. You have all these challenges. Nobody wants to take the risk. And that, I think, is the problem. And coming back to a company like News Corp, or you mentioned...
AFHU does it not. If they're not willing to
Very
take
much
risks, they're not willing to
Very
spend
much.
money on advertising and communications.
It means that clients are unwilling to leave it. Now, controlled companies like News Corp, or Fox, or Berkshire, but what I call Berkshire Hathaway, these companies move far more quickly and take more risk than those companies of which, let's say, are managerially controlled. And I think fundamentally we've seen quite a big difference in the way that companies behave post-Lehman. And I just think there's, now I would say this, wouldn't I? Because I want clients to be more expansive. I want them to invest in brands.
Encourage them to grow.
Yes.
All right, let me ask him some other things. So there was this huge merger between Publicis and Omnicom.
What merger are you talking about, Charlie? I thought it was a dead pog, not a,
All right.
not a live one.
So when you read that they had pulled it off, did you say to yourself, damn it, Maurice, he has just done it. He's pulled off what I dreamed of doing. It's going to shoot him way past me. He's now the biggest dog in the
pound.
In the park.
Well, he didn't pull it off, did he? Because
No, he didn't.
He announced it. So, as we know, there's exchange of contracts and there's completion.
Did this bring tears to your eyes when you realized this was not going to go through?
Well, I actually, very funnily, can I tell the story? It's a long, boring story, but I will do it. Right, so
Make it short and boring.
Okay, I'll try and make it short and boring. So I was sitting there, and a Bloomberg reporter sends me a note to say, 2 of your competitors are going to merge, and one of them is not IPG, which leads you to the conclusion that it's Publicis and Omnicom. So I send the email that I got from the reporter to Maurice and John Wren and said, congratulations. No answer. The day later, the European correspondent of Bloomberg says the same thing, not having talked to the American Bloomberg reporter. 2 of you are going to merge. One of them is not IPG. And Maurice is going to be CEO, and John Wren is going to be chairman. So I took the email. I sent it to Maurice and John. I said, can I be CFO? No answer.
And you had a financial background, so it was a perfectly legitimate request. Yeah.
And by the way,
that's what you did at Saatchi & Saatchi.
What stopped the deal was they couldn't agree on the CFO. So they picked me. No. They would have had it all. So then a week later, this Bloomberg reporter rings up and says, "Isn't there anybody? I've got this one source, and we don't print a story on one source. Isn't there anybody inside your organization that knows what's going on?" And she sent me an email. It was, if I ever published a book, I would probably reprint the email. She said, "Are all your people stupid? Don't they know?" And I said, "Well, I'm not the bloody journalist." And anyway, the story ran, and I was on holiday, actually, and the Monday morning, the answer to I instinctively felt, and I'm not saying this after, I instinctively felt on that Monday morning that the deal was ill-fated and probably had a chance of not happening, but if it did happen, it was going to be a disaster.
So what's the deal? What's the deal between you and Maurice? Well, how did this love affair begin?
I think probably he's Sephardic and I'm Ashkenazi.
Well, that explains it to me.
No, I mean, listen.
Robert Thompson will explain what that means later to me.
We tried to analyze when it all started.
Way back when Saatchi & Saatchi, and there are two varying accounts. I've looked at this. There are 2 accounts of this, because I know Maurice well, as you know, and have interviewed him as well. And, I mean, whether this meeting took place in Paris when you and Saatchi went over to see them, or it took place in London when he came over because you wanted, and Saatchi & Saatchi wanted to talk about how the 2 parties could work together to do something in terms of the American market, right?
Yeah, and I remember.
But you have different memories of where it took place.
I have a superb memory, and I remember it like it is today, like I'm sitting here with you. And I remember we went.
So does he.
Got it wrong. We went to the Arc de Triomphe, to the drugstore above, because they still own the drugstore. Their office is above. We went into Marcel Blaustein-Blanchet's office. He was sitting where you are. The
founder of Publicis.
They've kept the office as it is, as it was then, to today, and he's since died.
This is the office that General Eisenhower used when he came to Paris.
Right. And so he was sitting there. Maurice Saatchi sitting where I am. I'm sitting to the right, and there's Maurice Levy standing up, no chair for him,
Yes.
and Marcel is saying, go get the coffee.
So you figured he was a coffee boy.
Well, I didn't say that. I just said, go get the coffee. And that's what he said. And you know, we laugh about this, but, you know, that was it. And I remember it very clearly because Maurice Sarchi said to Blasting Blanchet, we want to do this big deal in America because we always had big ambitions, which was great. You know, nothing is impossible was the motto. And Marcel Blasting Blanchet said, my French is not anywhere near good enough, but basically he used the phrase sur les pattes de velours, which means on velvet paws. The symbol of Publicis is a lion, and he said no, he was basically saying, we will only do things small. That was the first meeting.
Okay, so tell me this. So this merger did not take place. Did you immediately say, okay, this is a real opportunity for me. I can jump in here and get some new clients because there's going to be a fallout?
Well, it was happening. So the deal was announced, what was it, July 27th or whatever it was last year, and it cratered after about 9 months. So you had this interregnum period where they were losing people, about 4-1 to us, and they were losing clients. So, and I think, by the way, Charlie, the reason they called it off in the end, I mean, they obviously couldn't work things out from a ego point of view, turf, territory, whatever, structure.
Culture.
But the reason it fell apart was I think they started to see that there is no such thing as a merger of equals. It was billed as the merger of equals. That, you know, that mergers of equals don't work. I mean, name me one that has ever worked. I mean, maybe somebody started off equal, but then they quickly thought.
All right. I got a couple more questions before we get on with what we came here for, to give this high honor to you. The idea of only the paranoid survive, a famous book by Andy Grove, have you lived by that?
Well, I think when you start a company with 2 people in one room, as we did in 1985, your biggest fear is you go back to being 2 people in one room. So I think
Yes.
I think the continuous, you know, it is whether you call it fear, paranoia, whatever it is. And by the way, the other thing is it's very personal. I mean, there was a great British English football manager called Bill Shankly. He was the Alex Ferguson of his time with Liverpool Football Club, and he had a wonderful phrase: "Football is not a matter of life and death; it's more important than that." And my interpretation.
Vince Lombardi said something like that too.
Right. WPP is not a matter of life and death; it's more important than that. So everything that happens with my baby, right, and it's the nearest a man can come to giving birth, not physically, but to an idea. Anything that happens to my baby, I take personally.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting. In all the conversations I've done, Warren Buffett feels that way. He feels like his great contribution is Berkshire Hathaway. Steve Jobs felt the same way about Apple. But
just one thing on that. Jeff Immelt said something very interesting. I think you were there at the Microsoft conference. When he was asked about succession, he said when he looks at his people, and because he's not an owner, or somebody who started, he's a manager. He said people say to him, you know, they ring up and say, we lost that contract, we didn't win that contract. And he said, and the guy at the other end of the phone says, you know, well, we win some, we lose some. And Jeff said, I never like to lose some. I want to win it all. And I think that was really interesting because he has that same attitude that I think you have if you found something. I mean, he is so emotionally attached to it that winning is really important.
One final question. Tell me about your connection to Israel, because in your own observations, I mean, Hebrew University is a great university, ranked high when you get beyond the sort of first top 20. Technology in Israel has been a remarkable achievement for the Israeli people. What's your own sense of and connection to Israel?
Well, I think obviously being Jewish, it's fundamental. If you visit Israel, you know, I have 3 boys, and when they were bar mitzvahed, we went We did our tour of Israel in a day or so. We went round Israel in a day or so. So, I mean, emotionally, obviously...
That says something about why security is so important.
Yeah, but emotionally, it's really extremely important. One of the questions that they gave you to ask me, which you haven't asked me, was, what's our business like in Israel? And
I don't follow directions.
No, I know you don't. No, it's fine. Quite obviously. And one of the things interesting is our business in Israel could be better. Let me put it like that. Israelis are very difficult to deal with. I mean, they are.
No, you wouldn't say that about Ron Perlman.
No. Ron is a pussycat, but a big cat. But they are very difficult. They are no privates. They are all generals. They can always, they always second guess you. But so that's on one side, and it is difficult. Maybe it's history. You had to some extent, you think about South Korea and Seoul, and you remember there are those penetration tunnels that the North Koreans have built. That makes you sort of insecure. If you look at Israel and how it's surrounded, and
you look at Gaza.
Yeah, I mean it's very difficult. Walls everywhere. So it emotionally is very difficult. Now the technology piece is really interesting because that's really extremely strong, and that's where the big opportunity is for us, and I think for the country as a whole. So when I went a few months ago, we formed this committee with the mayor of Jerusalem, and we went into the West Bank, and we saw the Arabs, we saw the city they were building, and when we were there a few months ago, before the terrible events surrounding Gaza started to develop, I mean, we saw Mobileye, for example, before the IPO, okay? What was very interesting was, we do Ford and we do Volvo. Mobileye is a key part of Ford and Volvo's strategy. I rang the guys who run Ford and Volvo, and I said, do you know anything about Mobileye? They knew nothing about Mobileye. When I described the technology, they understood. So it's the Intel inside problem. I mean, Mobileye is not recognized by people who deal with the company as well as, but it's a very good example of what we're talking about. And the fact that that technology was developed at the university and developed around the university, like you see on the west coast of America or Silicon Fen at Cambridge, I think is phenomenal.
Let me just add my congratulations to this award. I mean, it's great to be as successful in business as you are, but it's also great to have as many friends as you do, and it is appropriate that I now ask one of them to come up here and present this award.
I should thank you, Charlie, for, I know you've got a hectic schedule. You've just come from doing something else. So a big thank you.